Their scanners picked up a large circular structure. It's been dubbed the Baltic Sea Anomaly.
In 2011, a small Swedish exploration company called Ocean X was exploring the bottom of the Baltic Sea when its sonar detected something unusual. A massive circular object, resting 90 meters below the surface with straight edges and a mysterious trail stretching hundreds of meters behind it. Within days of its discovery, the story spread around the world. Some claimed it was a crashed UFO. Others believed it was part of the lost city of Atlantis. Some even suggested it was the remains of an ancient machine. For years, the Baltic Sea Anomaly became one of the Internet's greatest mysteries. But when scientists finally investigated the site and carefully studied the evidence, they reached a conclusion that was completely different from the stories spreading online. So what was really hiding at the bottom of the Baltic Sea? To understand that, we need to go back to what really happened in the first place. The unusual discovery. In the summer of 2011, Peter Lindberg and Dennis Osberg, what they had done for years. The two men ran a small Swedish exploration company called Ocean X. Their job was simple: search the bottom of the Baltic Sea for old shipwrecks. Because, for centuries, this region has been one of the busiest waterways in Europe. Warships, merchant vessels, and trading ships have been crossing these waters for a long time. Some of them never make it home. And finding those wrecks was how Lindberg and Osberg made their living. They weren't amateur explorers. They were experienced professionals who knew exactly what a shipwreck looked like on a sonar screen. In fact, just a few years earlier, they had made international headlines after discovering a shipwreck near the Åland Islands that still held more than 160 bottles of champagne. Some of those bottles were later sold at a Christie's auction for incredible prices, proving just how valuable their discoveries could be. So in June 2011, when they headed into the Gulf of Bothnia between Sweden and Finland, they had expected it would be another routine mission. But little did they know that it would become one of the most surprising discoveries ever made in this region. As Lindberg and Asberg were scanning this waterway using sonar, they noticed something strange. The object lay 90 meters below the surface. But what made it so unusual was that it didn't look like a ship or anything else they had ever seen. Instead, it looked almost perfectly round. The object measured around 60 meters across, about the length of a 6-story building lying on its side. Even stranger, it had edges that looked unusually straight, almost as if they had been carefully designed instead of formed by nature. And that wasn't all. Behind the object, the sonar showed a long, flat mark stretching across the seafloor for almost 300 meters. It looked like something enormous had slid across the seabed before coming to a stop. At first, the crew didn't think much of it. A strong sonar signal in this part of the Baltic usually meant one thing: a shipwreck. So they ran the sonar for a second time. But the same strange shape appeared. They even adjusted the sonar settings and changed the frequency. Still, the image didn't change. Peter Lindberg and Dennis Asberg later said it was unlike anything the team had discovered after years of searching the Baltic Sea. They had left the harbor expecting to find another lost ship in the sea. But what they had stumbled across would become one of the most talked-about underwater discoveries of the 21st century. The strange shape. The sonar image wasn't very clear. It was grainy and lacked detail. However, the longer people looked at it, the more unusual it seemed. Some thought they could see a raised outer edge. Others pointed to what looked like straight lines. A few people even believed they could make out something that looked like a staircase. Whatever that was, no one could say for certain. But one thing was clear. The picture didn't look like an ordinary shipwreck. And that was enough to gather everyone's attention. Before long, someone noticed that the object looked surprisingly similar to the famous spaceship from Star Wars. Within months, it had a new nickname, the Millennium Falcon of the Baltic Sea, and it spread across the internet almost overnight. However, things got worse in 2012 when a British news outlet published the story, and suddenly it became international news. Some people believed it was a crashed alien spacecraft. Others claimed it could be part of the lost city of Atlantis. Some even suggested it was a secret Nazi base or a hidden U-boat. The internet exploded with debates. Even documentary filmmakers started calling Ocean X to talk about this. Almost overnight, the small Swedish treasure hunting team found itself at the center of one of the world's biggest underwater mysteries. Over the years, the stories became even more dramatic. In recent videos and online posts, some people have started calling the object the corpse of technology. Because according to these claims, it isn't a natural formation at all, but the fossilized remains of an ancient machine built long before recorded history. But there was one big problem with all of these theories. None of them was supported by scientific evidence. They were all based on a single blurry sonar image, a sensational news story, and years of online speculation. That was enough to capture the world's imagination, but not enough to convince scientists. The only way to solve the mystery was to visit the site itself. So a team of scientists and marine researchers launched an investigation to examine the object with their own eyes. The investigation. One of the first experts to study the sonar data was Hanumant Singh from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Instead of focusing on the object's strange shape, Singh looked closely at the sonar image itself and how it had been recorded. Charles Paul, a senior scientist at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, shared his own interpretation. Jonathan Hill, from Arizona State University's Mars Space Flight Facility, also examined the extraordinary claims that were spreading online. Unlike the internet, these scientists weren't trying to prove that it was a UFO or dismiss it as a hoax. They all wanted the same thing: reliable evidence. But there was one problem. The original sonar scan from 2011 simply wasn't detailed enough to give a clear answer. If they wanted to solve the mystery, they needed to examine the object much more closely. So in 2012, the Ocean X team returned to the exact location with far better equipment than before. They upgraded their sonar equipment to capture clearer images. They brought higher-resolution underwater cameras. They even added satellite communication equipment. Before sending divers down nearly 90 meters, they first deployed a remotely operated vehicle to inspect the site. Their goal was simple. This time, they wanted answers instead of more questions. During the expedition, they collected rock samples from the object. They also recorded hours of underwater dive footage. At first, it seemed like this new evidence would finally solve the mystery. Instead, it divided the story into two completely different paths. Many people expected these new discoveries to finally settle the mystery. Instead, they created two completely different stories. One story became famous around the world and convinced many people that the Baltic Sea Anomaly was something impossible. The other story was based on scientific evidence. The laboratory results painted a very different picture. But unlike the divers' dramatic stories, those scientific findings received very little attention. To understand what really happened, we first need to look at what the divers claimed they found on the seafloor: the underwater examination. The dive itself was anything but easy. The object was resting about 90 meters below the surface of the northern Baltic Sea, where the water stays just above freezing for most of the year. Down there, sunlight doesn't reach the sea floor. At that depth, even a small mistake could become dangerous within seconds. But before anyone entered the water, something happened that the Ocean X team would never forget. As they moved their boat toward the anomaly, they claimed that several electronic systems suddenly stopped working. According to the crew, Their cameras, satellite phone, and other onboard equipment all failed at nearly the same time. Then, after moving about 200 meters away from the site, everything started working normally again. The crew said they repeated the test several times. Each time they approached the site, the equipment failed. Each time they moved roughly 200 meters away, everything came back online. Ocean X co-founder Dennis Osberg later said this unexpected behavior disturbed the crew more than the sonar image ever had. But to find out what really lay at the bottom, someone had to make a dive. That diver was Stefan Hogerborn, an experienced professional who had spent years working underwater. He wasn't expecting to find anything extraordinary. Like many scientists, he assumed the anomaly would probably turn out to be an unusual rock formation shaped by glaciers thousands of years ago. But once he reached the bottom, he said he saw something he hadn't expected. Instead of an ordinary boulder, he described what looked like a large vertical wall rising from the sea floor. He said its surface appeared unusually smooth, and in some places it seemed to meet the seabed at what looked like a sharp 90-degree angle. As he continued exploring, he reported seeing several flat surfaces connected by straight edges, giving the object a shape that looked surprisingly geometric. Then he noticed something even stranger. On the upper part of the object, he described a circular opening surrounded by what appeared to be a square border. To the Ocean X team, it looked almost like a hatch or a window carved into stone. According to him, the rock appeared dark, smooth, and unlike anything he expected to find on the seafloor. At first, many scientists questioned these claims because extreme underwater conditions can make natural rocks look artificial. To be sure, what actually lay out there, scientists had to look at the physical evidence. The rock analysis. To settle the mystery once and for all, the Ocean X team collected several rock samples from the site and sent them for analysis at the laboratory of Volker Bruckert at Stockholm University. If the object was really an ancient machine or the remains of an unknown structure, the rocks should contain something unusual. Instead, the results told a very different story. Most of the samples were identified as granite, gneiss, and sandstone, three of the most common rock types found around the Baltic Sea. When geologists, including Volker Bruckert from Stockholm University, examined the samples, they found nothing that suggested the rocks had been manufactured or altered by intelligent beings. Later, other Swedish geologists, including Fredrik Klingberg and Martin Jakobsson, also studied some of the material. Even their analysis showed that the samples contained natural minerals such as limonite and goethite, compounds that commonly form on the seafloor over thousands of years. At first, it looked like the mystery had finally been solved, but upon closer examination, the team noticed that one of the samples contained a small piece of basalt, a volcanic rock. But how could volcanic rock end up in a part of the Baltic Sea where there are no active volcanoes? To answer that, we first need to look at the place where it was found. The object lies beneath the Gulf of Bothnia, on top of a huge geological formation called the Fennoscandian Shield. This is one of the oldest and most stable pieces of Earth's crust. It has existed for billions of years and has changed very little compared with many other parts of the world. Because of that, scientists say one popular theory simply doesn't fit. Finnish planetary geomorphologist Jarmo Korteniemi explains that this region has not experienced active volcanism since the Proterozoic Eon, which ended about 541 million years ago. That means there are no active volcanoes beneath the Gulf of Bothnia. There are no underground magma chambers, and there is no heat source that could create an underwater volcanic vent. So the idea that the Baltic Sea Anomaly was formed by a recent volcanic eruption simply doesn't match the geology. But that doesn't mean there isn't a natural explanation. In fact, scientists believe a much more powerful force shaped this entire landscape. When scientists mapped the seafloor of the Bothnian Sea, they found that the anomaly wasn't the only feature with this shape. Bathymetric surveys revealed many raised mounds and ridges across the region. Even more interesting, many of them were aligned in the same northwest to southeast direction as the long track behind the Baltic Sea Anomaly. According to Korteniemi, that long feature is most likely a drumlin, a common landform created by moving glaciers, not a skid mark left by a crashing object. Even today, the land around the Baltic Sea is still changing. During the Ice Age, the enormous weight of ice pressed the Earth's crust downward. Now that the ice has been gone for thousands of years, the crust is slowly rising again. Scientists call this process post-glacial rebound. As the land continues to rise, the seafloor also changes. Sediment is slowly moved from one place to another. Some softer material is washed away. Meanwhile, denser glacial ridges remain in place, making them appear unusually sharp and well-preserved even after thousands of years. That helps explain why some underwater formations can still look so distinct today. So, after all this, what can we say for certain? What is this strange shape, really? The final conclusion. Now, this is what the scientific evidence actually says. And interestingly, scientists reached this conclusion years before many of the viral videos about the Baltic Sea Anomaly ever appeared online. After studying the sonar data, the rock samples, and the geology of the area, most geologists came to the same conclusion. The Baltic Sea Anomaly is most likely a natural rock formation. More specifically, researchers believe it is probably a moraine or a drumlin, landforms created by glaciers during the last ice age. But why did it look so unusual? Researchers think two things played a major role. The first was the sonar equipment. Some experts, including Hanumant Singh from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, pointed out that the original sonar system likely suffered from calibration and wiring problems. The second reason is something called pareidolia. Pareidolia is the tendency of the human brain to see familiar shapes in random patterns. It's why people sometimes see faces in clouds, or imagine a face in an electrical outlet. The same thing happened on Mars, where a shadow on a hill once convinced many people they were looking at an alien monument. Years later, better photographs revealed it was simply an ordinary mesa viewed from a particular angle. The laboratory results also supported these explanations. The rock samples contained granite, gneiss, and sandstone, all common rocks found in the Baltic region. Researchers also found a single piece of basalt, which they explained had most likely been carried there by glaciers during the last ice age. More importantly, the scientists found no metal, and no evidence that the object had ever been built by humans or anything else. There was another claim that remained unverified. The Ocean X team reported that electronic equipment stopped working whenever they came within about 200 meters of the object. But to this day, no independent research team has reproduced those equipment failures using properly calibrated scientific instruments. So there is still no verified evidence that a real electromagnetic dead zone exists. However, the story isn't completely over. As recently as 2025, the Society for UAP Studies announced plans to support a new expedition to the site. The goal was to collect much better data than ever before. The team planned to use multi-beam sonar, sub-bottom profiling, and detailed photogrammetric mapping to create a complete, high-resolution 3D model of the object. Surprisingly, even after more than 15 years since its discovery in 2011, no full, independently verified 3D survey of the entire Baltic Sea anomaly has been publicly released. And as of the time this story is being told, The results of that expedition still have not been published. That means one important piece of evidence is still missing, but a complete, modern, independently verified scan that anyone can study. So in the end, this wasn't the story of a crashed UFO, a lost civilization, or an ancient machine hidden beneath the Baltic Sea. It was the story of how one blurry sonar image sparked one of the biggest internet mysteries of the 21st century, and how years of scientific investigation gradually separated fact from speculation. But what do you think? Did science finally solve the Baltic Sea anomaly? Or do you believe there's still more to discover? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next mystery. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.